Welcome to the deep dive. You know, the world just keeps spinning faster and faster. And it feels like 1 minute we're trying to understand, like the tiny bacteria in our own bodies, and the next, boom, there's major political drama unfolding halfway across the globe. It's a lot. It really is. And who honestly has time to sift through every headline, every article? Yeah, that's pretty much why we're here. Think of this as your, let's say, curated tour through the really important stuff happening globally. Our mission today, to pull out those key bits of info, see how things connect maybe in ways you wouldn't expect, and just help make sense of the bigger picture without, drowning in information. So we're going to jump around a bit. We'll touch on the amazing science happening inside us, then zoom out to some mind-bending tech. Then, yeah, we'll definitely get into the thick of global politics and tackle some big issues about our planet and our health. So get ready. We're diving deep into a world that's changing fast, full of surprising links. There's some really profound stuff to unpack today. Hashtag cutting edge science and space exploration.
All right, let's kick things off by looking, inward, literally. We're starting with something called the gut-brain axis. And no, it's not just some catchy health trend phrase. It's like a real complex communication highway running between your stomach and your brain. Yeah, we're talking about how your inner ecosystem, your gut, is actually influencing your mind. It's kind of wild, and the implications are, well, they're huge.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. It really is. These tiny organisms, these microbes living inside us, are playing such a massive role in our cognitive health. And this isn't just day-to-day stuff. We're talking from the moment we develop all the way through aging. Researchers are finding that certain bacteria, particularly strains like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, they seem to actively help reduce inflammation in the brain.
Inflammation in the brain. Okay.
Exactly. And that's not a small thing. This could potentially help prevent serious neuroinflammatory conditions. It could safeguard our thinking abilities as we get older. We're even looking at possibilities that potential protection against diseases like Alzheimer's.
Whoa, okay, hold on. Protection against Alzheimer's from gut bacteria. That sounds massive. Is there like one really surprising thing from this research that people should really grasp?
I think the core takeaway, the really counterintuitive bit, is that your gut isn't just for digestion, not even close. It's a crucial communication center, and it's deeply influencing your brain's health right from the very start of life. We're heading towards a future where, managing your microbiome might be just as important for brain health as, say, getting exercise. It could potentially delay or even prevent diseases like Alzheimer's. It really forces us to see these internal ecosystems differently as key drivers of our mental well-being. It's a whole new angle for preventative medicine. And we see this in animal studies, too. For instance, studies showed that pups born to mothers with really diverse, healthy gut microbiomes, they showed much better neurodevelopmental outcomes.
Wow.
Yeah. And it suggests that, conversely, disruptions during those critical early periods could actually make individuals more prone to neurodevelopmental disorders later on, like autism spectrum disorders, ASD. The mother's microbiome seems to almost like fortify the baby's immune system and brain development.
So literally, your mom's gut health could influence your brain development. That's really powerful. Huge implications for early life care, preventative medicine. Okay, shifting gears now. From that micro-universe inside us, let's look back in time to ancient civilizations, the Maya kingdom. Apparently, new archaeological finds are shaking up old theories about why they collapsed. Something about widespread fires.
That's right. We've often heard about drought or maybe internal conflict as the main reasons for the Maya collapse, but this new evidence, physical evidence of large-scale burning events, it suggests something maybe more complex, perhaps more catastrophic was going on. And what this really underscores is how vital interdisciplinary research is. You can't just look at the archaeology. You need to bring in anthropology, environmental science, combine all those perspectives to really piece together how human actions and environmental changes interacted back then. It gives us a much richer, more nuanced picture than just, a simple historical story.
Yeah, this evidence of burning, it feels so concrete, doesn't it? Like a clue left behind. It makes you think about how societies, even complex ones, can unravel when they face multiple crises at once, conflict, environmental shifts. I mean, are we seeing echoes of that today? Is there one big lesson from the Maya collapse that really hits home for us now?
I'd say the most striking lesson is just how interconnected everything is. It wasn't just one thing that brought down the Maya. It wasn't just the environment or just politics. It was this incredibly complex web of factors feeding into each other. And yes, we absolutely see echoes today. Think about societies dealing with rapid climate change, resource shortages, political instability, all at the same time. Understanding those tipping points, those cascading failures in ancient societies like the Maya, it can give us really profound insights into our own vulnerabilities today. It pushes us to think about holistic solutions, not just tackling one problem at a time.
That's a really important point about interconnectedness.
Right.
Okay, and speaking of delicate natural systems, let's talk about a really cool discovery in California's Eel River. Researchers from Northern Arizona University, that's NAU, and the University of California, Berkeley, they've found this unique, micro-scale nutrient factory. And this isn't something humans built, right? This is natural.
Oh, completely natural. And incredibly efficient, it turns out. It's run by these tiny little things called diatoms. They're a type of microalgae, and they work together with symbiotic bacteria. They basically act as miniature factories, converting sunlight and nutrients into energy. And the amazing part, it's totally pollution-free.
Wow.
Yeah. And this whole process is vital for sustaining the local ecosystem. It's particularly crucial for supporting the salmon population there, which in turn is really important for the local tribal communities and just the overall biodiversity of the Eel River area. The researchers found that these factories really thrive in late summer conditions, hosted on strands of another algae called cladophora.
That's amazing. A pollution-free, self-powering system feeding an ecosystem. What does that tell us about maybe future sustainable approaches? Can we apply this somehow, like in agriculture?
Well, it certainly offers a very compelling model. The fact that it's pollution-free is huge. It suggests there's significant potential here for developing more sustainable methods, maybe in farming. Imagine if we could figure out how to harness similar biological processes on a larger scale, perhaps by mimicking these kinds of symbiotic relationships. It could lead to farming methods that are much less reliant on, say, synthetic fertilizers, reducing environmental pressure. It could even contribute to climate resilience. It really shows how understanding these small natural processes could inform really big changes in how we produce food.
Very cool. Okay, from the environment to our own health, let's tackle a familiar foe, the flu, especially for older adults. Research from the University of California, San Diego has made a big step in figuring out why seniors face a higher risk of getting really sick from influenza. It's apparently more than just, a weaker immune system overall.
It is. It's more specific than that. This research zooms in on a particular protein called apolipoprotein D, or APOD for short. Now, levels of APOD are known to increase as we age.
Okay.
And what this study found is that these higher APOD levels actually disrupt the normal immune response when the flu hits. This disruption leads to more damage in lung tissue and generally worse outcomes for older patients. So essentially, elevated APOD makes older folks more vulnerable to severe flu by messing with their body's defense mechanisms.
Huh. So identifying APOD as the culprit, that could really change things for flu season for older people.
Yeah.
What does that open up now? What are the next research steps, or are there ethical things to think about if we start trying to tweak this protein?
Well, the immediate path is definitely therapeutic intervention. Now that APOD is identified as a key player, researchers can focus on developing ways to maybe modify its activity or counteract its negative effects. The goal is to basically strengthen the immune response in older adults during flu season. This could involve developing new drugs, perhaps even targeted therapies. And yes, anytime you talk about modifying biological processes like this, especially potentially with things like gene therapies down the line, ethical questions definitely come up.
Right.
Things like access, cost, long-term safety, ensuring everyone who needs it can get it. But the potential benefit is huge, reducing the really significant illness and death that the flu causes in the elderly population every year. So it's a very timely finding.
Absolutely. Okay, sticking with how our bodies work, let's talk about feeling sleepy all the time. A study that Science Daily highlighted recently found 7 specific molecules in our blood that seem to correlate with excessive daytime sleepiness EDS, which apparently affects 1 in 3 Americans. That's a lot. 7 molecules possibly explaining constant tiredness. What's the science saying here?
Yeah, the findings are pretty interesting, and they really point towards how important our metabolism is in all this. The study identified certain fatty acids, specifically omega-3s and omega-6s, as having potentially a protective role against drowsiness.
Oh.
Likely because of their anti-inflammatory properties. We know inflammation can contribute to fatigue. But on the flip side, a compound called tyramine, which you find in things like aged cheeses, cured meats, fermented foods, that might actually make sleepiness worse for some people. So it really highlights how the way our bodies process different nutrients can significantly impact our energy levels and just our general health. It's this complex dance between diet, biochemistry, and how energetic we feel.
So my love for a good omega-3 rich fish might actually be fighting my afternoon slump. But that late-night cheese plate, Becky the villain,
Yeah.
slight chuckle.
And it's not just about feeling groggy, is it? EDS is linked to some pretty serious long-term health problems, too.
That's right. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a real public health issue. Excessive daytime sleepiness has been linked to higher risks of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, serious stuff.
Yeah.
Which really underlines the need for more than just, drinking more coffee. We need proper interventions. The research suggests a holistic approach is best looking at dietary changes, improving sleep habits, managing stress. And this fits perfectly with other research showing how not getting enough sleep can trigger inflammatory responses. It's all connected, the molecules, the food, the sleep, the inflammation. Fascinating. Okay, let's blast off from our inner biology now way out into space. And let's start with something critical. Planetary defense. Remember NASA's DART mission. That's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's double asteroid redirection test. Launched in 2021, smashed into that little moonlit asteroid Dimorphos back on September 26, 2022. What did we actually learn from playing cosmic billiards?
Well, first off, it was a resounding success in proving the basic concept. It showed that, yes, we can change an asteroid's path using what's called a kinetic impactor, basically, hitting it with a spacecraft. DART shortened Dimorphos's orbit around its parent asteroid Didymos by a whopping 32 minutes. The goal was only 73 seconds, so huge success there.
Aye.
However, there was a big surprise. The impact was much more energetic than expected, and it blasted off about 100 massive boulders from Dimorphos out into space.
100 boulders, whoa!
Yeah. Professor David Jewett at UCLA called it the unexpectedly energetic nature of the impact. And this complicates things quite a bit. It could make future deflection missions trickier and potentially create new, smaller hazards we didn't anticipate.
Talk about unintended consequences. You solve one problem and create 100 smaller, rocky ones. So how does this discovery of flying boulders change how we plan to defend Earth from asteroids in the future?
It means we need much more sophisticated strategies. The focus now is shifting towards developing highly accurate probability maps. These maps will help us predict exactly where the debris might go and how the asteroid's path might change over time, including any fragments. The big worry is accidentally nudging an asteroid into what's called a gravitational keyhole.
A gravitational keyhole. Sounds ominous.
It is, potentially. It's a tiny region in space where Earth's gravity could tweak an asteroid's path just enough to send it on a collision course years or decades later, even from a small initial nudge. DART's boulder-spewing impact makes understanding and avoiding these keyholes absolutely critical for any future deflection attempt. We need to be incredibly precise.
Precision is key. Okay, from defending Earth to searching for life elsewhere.
Yeah.
Saturn's moon Enceladus, with those amazing water plumes spotted by NASA's Cassini spacecraft.
Yeah.
It's been a top candidate for alien life, right?
Yeah.
Because those plumes had organic molecules. But now there's new research kind of pouring cold water on that idea.
Yeah, it's a fascinating twist, and it raises a really important question. Are we interpreting the signs of life correctly out there, or is the universe just really, really good at mimicking life chemistry? This new research suggests those organic molecules found in the plumes might not actually be coming from the subsurface ocean, which is the exciting part. Instead, they might be created by radiation hitting the moon's icy surface. Just radiation breaking down ice and other simple molecules into more complex organic ones abiotically. So it forces a major rethink of Enceladus's potential to host life as we know it.
Right.
Enceladus itself is still amazing, of course. It's about 500 kilometers across, covered in bright snow. It has active geysers and definitely a deep subsurface ocean, maybe 10 kilometers deep. And they even found sodium chloride crystals, which adds another layer of complexity to its geology. It just means the organics might have a non-biological source.
So the very chemicals that got everyone excited about life might just be cosmic chemistry, not biology, a red herring. How does this change the bigger picture, the overall hunt for life in our solar system?
It really emphasizes a need for caution and extremely rigorous scientific method. We can't just jump to conclusions when we see organic molecules. It pushes scientists to develop much better ways to tell the difference between organic chemistry that happens naturally, abiotically, and actual biosignature signs of life. It definitely impacts how we think about habitable conditions elsewhere and highlights why future missions need even more advanced instruments to really pin down the origin of these kinds of compounds. The universe is complex, and finding life isn't going to be easy. We have to be thorough. Hashtag tag the tech revolution and its ethical crossroads.
All right, let's pull back from the outer solar system and zoom right into the digital world.
Yeah.
Because the tech revolution just keeps accelerating, changing everything. First up, Google, part of Alphabet Inc. They've just massively expanded their AI mode. 5 new languages added: Hindi, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean, and Brazilian Portuguese. That's not just a small tweak, is it? That feels pretty significant.
Oh, it's absolutely significant. This vastly increases the reach and usability of Google's AI services across huge populations, especially in Asia and South America. It makes their tools much more accessible, breaks down language barriers for information access. And strategically, yes, it's part of Google's ongoing competition with rivals, like Microsoft's AI efforts, and their push to integrate these advanced generative AI features right into their core search experience. It's about global reach, user convenience, and fundamentally shaping how billions interact with digital information.
5 new languages. That's huge. Seriously, imagine what that unlocks for communication, for learning, for so many people. Really lowers the barrier. But, this relentless push for smarter AI, it also brings challenges, like this hallucination problem we're hearing about with OpenAI's models. A study found these chatbots often just make stuff up, confidently give wrong answers they hallucinate, instead of just saying, I don't know.
Yeah, and this points to a really deep fundamental challenge in AI development. How do you build an AI that actually understands its own limits, not just recognizing our limits, but its own?
Right.
It's a core issue if we want these systems to be truly reliable, especially for anything important. And OpenAI, that's OpenAI LP, they acknowledge this. They've said their models are basically trained to make educated guesses, to generate text that sounds plausible, rather than recognizing when they simply don't have enough solid information. It's not just a minor bug. It's a critical area that needs a lot more research if we want AI we can actually trust.
So how do you teach an AI to say, I don't know? And what happens if we don't solve this hallucination thing, especially as AI gets woven into more and more of our lives?
Teaching AI uncertainty is a major research focus right now. It involves things like training models on data that specifically includes examples of saying, I don't know, or expressing doubt. Also, developing better ways for the AI to estimate its own confidence in an answer. If we don't solve this, the implications are pretty scary. You risk a flood of convincing but totally wrong information spreading online. This could seriously erode public trust in AI systems, lead to bad decisions if used in fields like medicine or finance, and of course be weaponized for misinformation campaigns. It could fundamentally undermine the reliability of digital information as a whole.
Yeah, that's a huge ethical hurdle for AI developers. Okay, but on a brighter note for AI's future and tackling another major concern, energy use researchers down at the University of Florida have created something amazing, a light-powered chip for AI. And it's supposedly up to 100 times more power efficient than traditional silicon chips. 100 times. That's incredible.
It absolutely is a real breakthrough. This directly tackles what people are increasingly calling the energy crisis in AI. Right now, training and running these large AI models uses absolutely vast amounts of electricity. It's becoming unsustainable, environmentally concerning. So a 100-fold increase in efficiency isn't just a small step, it's a massive leap. It could fundamentally change the environmental impact of AI. It could allow for much more powerful AI applications to be deployed more widely without completely overwhelming our energy grids. It makes powerful AI potentially much more sustainable.
That could be a game changer for making AI greener and maybe even more accessible if it lowers running costs. Okay, speaking of sustainable power, but shifting to data centers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Deep Fission. This is a nuclear startup making waves. They just announced plans to go public via SPAC. That's a special purpose acquisition company. What's their big idea? It sounds different.
It is quite innovative.
Yeah.
Their plan is to place small modular reactors, SMRs, about a mile underground.
A mile down, wow.
Yes. And the purpose is to generate clean, reliable, sustainable energy specifically for powering data centers, which are incredibly energy hungry. So it's an approach that aims to tackle the energy demands of our digital age using nuclear power's efficiency. And crucially, by putting these reactors deep underground, they hope to directly address and mitigate the public safety concerns and perceptions that have historically surrounded nuclear power. Thinking about incidents like 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, Chernobyl in Ukraine, Fukushima in Japan. The underground placement, combined with advanced SMR technology and designs, is meant to build confidence.
Burying the reactors deep underground. That's a pretty novel way to tackle the fear factor. Do the investment folks think this could actually spark a new wave of nuclear projects?
That seems to be the hope, yes. Some investment experts see this as a potential catalyst. It could encourage more projects in the nuclear energy sector, especially SMRs, which aligns with the broader global push for clean, reliable energy sources. It directly links the growing energy needs of the digital world, driven by data centers and AI, with a potential low-carbon solution. It's trying to make nuclear more palatable, more deployable, and a bigger part of our sustainable energy mix.
Interesting approach.
Yeah.
Okay, from the physical hardware powering AI to its growing presence online, let's tackle something slightly unnerving, the rise of bots. There's this warning floating around that bots could soon make up the majority of online traffic, just pumping out content without any real human thought behind it.
Yeah, and this really leads us to a critical question. If the internet becomes mostly bots talking to bots, what does that mean for actual human connection in the digital age? The sophistication of AI, especially generative AI, means these systems can now produce pretty coherent text, simulate conversations. They can be used for advertising, customer service, spreading information, but often without any genuine human creativity, empathy, or, soul behind it. Organizations like the Pew Research Center have been looking into this, studying things like automated news articles and bot-run social media profiles.
So it could really dilute genuine human interaction online and obviously open the door wide for misinformation on a massive scale.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fundamental threat to, well, the authenticity of the internet.
It absolutely is. The concerns are huge. Misinformation, sure, but also data integrity. What's real, what's generated, and think about bias. If biased AI generates tons of content, it can amplify harmful stereotypes or narratives very quickly. It also risks fundamentally changing what online communities feel like. They've traditionally grown organically from human interaction. If they become dominated by bots, what does that do to us psychologically? Could it increase feelings of isolation even if we're technically connected? As bots get better and harder to spot, we really need to think critically about how we maintain genuine connection and figure out what's true in this increasingly artificial online world.
Lots to think about there. Okay, let's shift from the digital to the quantum realm for a second. This sounds cool. Researchers have managed to create modular superconducting qubits, the building blocks of quantum computers that can be assembled like Lego bricks. That sounds like a pretty big deal for quantum computing.
It is indeed a groundbreaking advance. Making quantum components modular like this is a huge leap towards building truly scalable and, importantly, fault-tolerant quantum computers. It allows scientists to connect and reconfigure quantum bits with high precision much more easily than before. Other companies, like Xanadu, are also exploring this modular approach. This could really speed up the development of much larger, more powerful quantum machines, the kind that could tackle incredibly complex problems, things like designing new materials, breaking current encryption, revolutionizing drug discovery, advancing AI further, connecting thousands, maybe millions, of these modular qubits together. It brings that quantum promise much, much closer to being a practical reality. Hashtag global political volatility and economic currents.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the often turbulent world of global politics and economics. There's a lot going on that really affects everyone. First stop, Nepal. Things have been incredibly tense there.
Yeah.
They recently lifted a ban on social media platforms like X, YouTube, Facebook. But wow, not before things got really serious. Intense protests led mainly by young people, the Gen Z protests, erupted. Tragically, 19 people were killed, hundreds injured. It really hammers home the power of these online platforms in driving real-world political change, doesn't it?
It's a truly stark example, yes. The protests weren't just about the social media ban itself, that was the trigger. It tapped into much deeper frustrations about government corruption, economic problems, things people were already angry about. And the confrontations became violent. Protesters burned politicians' homes, stormed the parliament building, attacked party offices. The police response was extreme, including using live ammunition. All this upheaval ultimately forced the Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, to resign. Apparently, the army chief, Purna Chandrathapa, advised him to step down. The Home Minister had already resigned earlier. International bodies like the UN called for restraint. India urged dialogue. It shows how serious and concerning the situation became on the world stage. The speed of it all, fueled by social media, is just remarkable.
Absolutely. Okay, from Nepal and the Himalayas, let's swing over to Europe. France seems to be facing a perfect storm. Political chaos, massive debt, and worries about it spilling over to the rest of the EU. This isn't just France's problem, is it?
Yeah. Definitely not. The potential ripple effects across the Eurozone are significant. What happened was Prime Minister Francois Bayrou's government got voted out, lost a confidence vote because their austerity measures failed to pass, so he resigned. And he's the second prime minister under President Emmanuel Macron to be ousted like this recently. It really highlights growing public anger and a deep political instability.
Wow, second one.
Yeah. And then there's the debt. France's national debt is enormous, around 3.35 trillion. That's like 113% of their whole economy, their GDP, and it's projected to hit 125% by 2030 if things don't change. They're under huge pressure from the EU to slash their budget deficit, get it down from over 5% to the EU limit of 3%. But making those kinds of deep cuts is incredibly unpopular politically, as we just saw. It's already making investors nervous, pushing up the interest rates on French government bonds. Some international reports from places like DW and RT have even called France's economic situation a potential ticking bomb for the EU's financial stability, warning about contagion effects.
A ticking bomb for the EU. That sounds serious. And the political scene sounds totally fractured, too. You mentioned Macron struggling.
Extremely fractured. There are widespread calls for strikes. Macron is finding it incredibly difficult to even appoint a successor to Bayrou or decide whether to risk calling snap elections, especially when polls show nearly 80% of the French public don't trust him right now. There have been protests in Paris demanding he resign. There's even this movement called Block Everything, urging people to boycott credit card use to protest economic inequality and the rising cost of living. And other European countries like Italy are watching this very nervously. Analysts worry this crisis in France could paralyze important EU decision-making. Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, even suggested European nations need to rethink their strategies, maybe rely less on the U.S., build stronger partnerships elsewhere. France 24 flat out called the situation very bad news for the EU. It really could destabilize European cooperation if it continues.
That is a massive amount of pressure on Macron and, yeah, the whole EU project.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting to a situation that remains incredibly dire. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the scale of the suffering there is just hard to fathom.
It's truly catastrophic. The Red Cross managed to distribute about 300 tents recently, but they immediately said it's nowhere near enough for the sheer number of displaced people needing shelter. The United Nations is warning of impending famine. Reports indicate nearly 12,000 people have died just since mid-March, and something like 80% of Gaza's population has been forced from their homes.
80%?
Yeah. Israel ordered a full evacuation of Gaza City, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a stark warning, talking about a mighty hurricane if Hamas doesn't surrender. Tragically, there are reports of casualties even among people just trying to get aid. There's also this large international effort, the global Sumud flotilla, around 1,000 activists, 50 boats, trying to bring in 300 tons of aid and draw global attention. Although there was controversy about an alleged drone strike on one of their vessels near Tunisia, which Tunisian officials denied happened. Adding to the international outcry, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the IAGS, they issue a statement declaring that, in their assessment, Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians. And the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, continues to condemn the ongoing fighting.
And the conflict seems to be spilling over geographically, too. What are the wider geopolitical ripples we're seeing?
The ripples are definitely spreading. There were reports of an explosion in Doha, the capital of Qatar, right around the time Israel announced it intended to target Hamas leadership located there.
In Qatar, wow.
Exactly. This is hugely significant because Qatar has often acted as a key mediator in regional conflicts, including between Israel and Hamas. Targeting leadership on Qatari soil raises massive questions about international law, sovereignty, and morality, and it could seriously damage Israel's relationship with Qatar and potentially other Gulf states. It risks destabilizing the entire region further and makes future diplomatic solutions even harder to achieve. The Gaza conflict is truly reverberating across the Middle East and beyond.
A deeply worrying situation. Okay, let's look elsewhere in Europe, specifically regarding Iran. There's been a major policy shift from the UK, France, and Germany concerning the Iran nuclear deal. They've triggered a snapback of UN sanctions set for 2025. This seems like a complete U-turn from their position a few years ago, doesn't it?
It's a total reversal, yes. Back in 2018, after then President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the deal, these European countries, the E3, vowed to protect the agreement. They even set up that special financial mechanism called INSTEX, remember, to try and allow trade with Iran despite U.S. sanctions.
Right, INSTEX. What happened with that?
Well, it effectively failed. It never really got off the ground in a meaningful way. So now, triggering the snapback of UN sanctions basically dismantles the very deal they tried to save. It really calls into question Europe's credibility and its whole idea of strategic autonomy acting independently on the world stage. It suggests they're still heavily influenced by U.S. pressure tactics and the likely outcome. It alienates Iran even further, probably pushing Tehran closer to partnerships with Russia and China. It's a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, sounds like a major blow to European diplomatic independence there. Okay, let's cross the Atlantic and look at U.S.-India relations, specifically around trade and Russian oil. Peter Navarro, who's a key aide to President Donald Trump, had some very strong words for India recently. He criticized their continued buying of Russian oil, even calling it blood money, because of the Ukraine conflict and sanctions. That's pretty blunt language.
Yeah, extremely blunt, yes, and it definitely reflects a specific hardline perspective within the current U.S. administration. Navarro, known for his very critical stance on trade issues, especially with nations he sees as rivals or unfair players, reportedly dismissed fact checks from Platform X regarding his comments. He didn't stop at the oil either. He also expressed deep frustration with India over ongoing trade negotiations, calling their tariff policies oppressive. He even dubbed the Indian government the Maharaja of tariffs.
Chuckles, the Maharaja of tariffs. That's a new one. Sounds like a villain from an economic superhero movie, doesn't it?
Chuckles, it certainly paints a picture. He went on to warn that India needed to take urgent actions to change its trade practices to avoid negative consequences for their relationship with the U.S. So yeah, it highlights very clearly the tensions from a particular right-leaning viewpoint focused heavily on perceived trade imbalances and applying strong pressure on allies.
Definitely underscores the different ways global trade and alliances are being viewed right now. Okay, from trade tensions to regional resource conflicts, Ethiopia's huge dam project, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, is causing major friction in Northeast Africa. Ethiopia just inaugurated it. It's meant to be Africa's biggest hydroelectric project, a massive $5 billion investment. But Egypt and Sudan downstream are strongly opposed.
Yes, and this is a textbook example of a transboundary water dispute, a clash over a shared vital resource, in this case, the Nile River. From Ethiopia's perspective, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed stresses that GRD is essential for their development. It's meant to generate enough electricity for their 120 million people and even allow them to export power.
Okay, sounds reasonable from their side.
But for Egypt, the Nile is literally their lifeline, their primary source of fresh water. They have profound concerns about how the dam's operation will affect their water supply, especially during droughts. Sudan shares similar concerns about water flow and dam safety. Talks between the three countries have stalled repeatedly, and both Egypt and Sudan view Ethiopia's unilateral actions in filling and operating the dam as a direct threat to their national security and regional stability.
So development for one means potential crisis for others.
Yeah.
Are there any potential upsides for Egypt or Sudan? Or is it all negative?
Well, it's complex. Some water management experts argue that GERD, if operated collaboratively, could offer some benefits downstream. For example, it might help regulate the Nile's flow, reducing extreme flooding, and potentially decreasing the amount of silt that clogs up Sudanese dams. But realizing those benefits requires trust and a binding agreement on how the dam is filled and operated, especially during dry years. And that trust, that agreement, is exactly what's missing right now.
Right. A classic geopolitical resource clash with huge stakes. Okay, let's turn back to U.S. politics. A really controversial topic keeps resurfacing, the connection between Jeffrey Epstein and prominent figures. The House Oversight Committee got hold of documents from Epstein's estate, including this birthday book, that allegedly has a note and maybe a drawing from President Donald Trump. This has really stirred things up again.
It certainly has, and it immediately got drawn into the political fray. It really highlights how information, or alleged information, gets used in such a polarized environment. And it also raises questions about, the selective release of documents and how that shapes public opinion depending on where you already stand politically.
How so? What were the reactions?
Well, Democrats on the committee quickly publicized the alleged note from Trump, but the White House and MAGA supporters instantly pushed back hard, calling it fake news, a likely forgery. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended the president, pointing out they're pursuing legal action against some media outlets for defamation over similar claims. Vice President J.D. Vance accused Democrats of just trying to score political points, exploiting the Epstein scandal to damage Trump rather than seeking truth. And committee chairman James Comer also criticized Democrats for selectively leaking information. So it immediately became another battleground in the ongoing political war rather than maybe a straightforward investigation.
Yeah, instantly politicized. It remains such a charged issue, fueling the divides and raising questions about evidence, spin, and trust. Okay, shifting to another intensely debated topic, U.S. immigration policy. There have been some key developments lately. The Supreme Court issued a ruling allowing government agents in California to temporarily resume immigration raids, specifically these roving patrols that can stop and detain migrants away from the border.
Right. And this decision aligns with and reinforces the stricter immigration enforcement approach favored by President Trump's administration. Adding to that, the U.S. border czar, Tom Homan, announced what he called a permanent surge in ICE's immigration and customs enforcement operations in the state of Massachusetts, part of an initiative dubbed Operation Patriot. So, from a right-leaning perspective, these moves are framed as necessary steps for border security and enforcing existing immigration laws.
Okay, but what's the reaction from the other side?
Well, critics, particularly immigrant rights groups and community leaders, argue strongly against these tactics. They contend that roving patrols and intensified raids inevitably lead to racial profiling, particularly targeting Latino communities, and instill widespread fear. They're urging the White House to reconsider the broader socioeconomic consequences and to focus instead on pursuing comprehensive immigration reform that addresses the root causes of migration and offers pathways to legal status. So it's a deeply polarized issue with very different views on policy and human impact. Hashtag planetary health, human health, and societal challenges.
All right, let's widen our lens now to focus on the health of our planet, our own well-being, and some of the big societal challenges we're all facing. China's role in green technology is fascinating. They're undergoing this huge green tech revolution, spearheaded by figures like environmental researcher Ma Jun and his Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, or IPE. But it seems like a real paradox, doesn't it? Leading in green tech while still being a massive polluter.
It absolutely is a paradox, and China is probably the most significant example of this tension on the global stage right now. On one hand, they've made truly remarkable progress in cleaning up their air and water in many areas. PM 2.5 pollution levels, for instance, dropped over 35% between 2015 and 2022. And they achieved this while simultaneously expanding their manufacturing base, which is quite different from the deindustrialization trend seen in many Western countries during their cleanup phases.
Right.
But on the other hand, yes, China remains the world's largest emitter of CO2 by a significant margin. A recent report from the think tank Ember highlighted this stark reality. Their sheer scale and continued reliance on coal for a large part of their energy mix mean their overall environmental footprint is still enormous.
So, real progress in some areas, but a massive mountain still to climb. What about their big climate pledges and those contradictions, like building new coal plants?
Well, China has committed to ambitious goals, peaking its carbon emissions before 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. And they are backing this up with absolutely massive investments in renewable energy solar, wind electric vehicles, EVs, and other advanced green technologies. They're even using AI for real-time pollution monitoring. Get this. China currently produces something like 60% of the world's wind turbines and 80% of solar panels. Their clean energy sector reportedly added almost $2 trillion to their economy last year alone.
Wow, staggering number.
But here's the paradox. At the same time they're doing all this, they're also building more new coal-fired power plants than the rest of the world combined. Investment in coal infrastructure hit new highs recently.
Why? Why build coal if you're pushing renewables?
It seems to be about energy security, ensuring they have enough power for their massive economy, especially as they transition. But it creates this deep contradiction. It also means new kinds of unregulated pollutants are emerging in some areas, and environmental degradation persists. Plus, Western nations are increasingly concerned that China's state-subsidized green industries are flooding global markets and undercutting their own manufacturers. It's incredibly complex.
A huge, complex balancing act with global consequences. Okay, shifting focus to Africa now. The continent is really stepping up to redefine its role in climate action. The Second African Climate Summit recently convened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 53 heads of state gathered, pushing for more cooperation and, crucially, more financial support. Sounds like Africa is finding a powerful, unified voice on climate.
It certainly seems that way. There's a clear push to change the narrative. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed explicitly called for redefining Africa's role, moving away from just being seen as victims of climate change to being recognized as a continent with immense potential to contribute to a cleaner global economy. Kenyan President William Ruto, for example, highlighted really ambitious renewable energy goals, aiming for 300 gigawatts of renewable capacity across the continent by 2030.
300 gigawatts. That's huge potential. But what are the roadblocks?
Significant hurdles remain, absolutely. High levels of national debt across many African countries severely limit their ability to invest in green projects. And then there's the issue of climate finance, the money pledged by richer nations to help developing countries adapt and transition. Africa receives only a tiny fraction of what it actually needs, despite possessing around 30% of the world's critical mineral reserves, minerals essential for batteries, solar panels, wind turbines.
The irony.
Exactly. So African leaders are calling for support to develop their own clean energy industries locally, not just exporting raw materials. They want better regional trade integration and are demanding just climate financing from the international community, basically, a fair share. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres echoed this, lamenting how unfairly clean energy investments are currently distributed, with Africa being largely overlooked. It's a major issue of global equity.
A clear call for fairness and partnership. Okay, let's look at waste now. The European Union is taking aim at two massive sources: food waste and fast fashion. They're planning some significant new laws.
Yes, the EU is getting quite serious about tackling waste. For food, they're setting a target to cut waste by 30% by 2030 that includes waste from households, restaurants, and supermarkets. We're talking about tackling nearly 60 million metric tons of food thrown away each year in the EU. That waste costs an estimated $132 billion and generates about 16% of the EU's total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a big environmental and economic issue.
60 million tons. Unbelievable. What about textiles, fast fashion?
For textiles, the new regulations are focused on promoting sustainability throughout the product lifecycle. A key part is extended producer responsibility, or EPR. This means the manufacturers, the brands, will have to cover the costs associated with collecting, sorting, and recycling their clothing when consumers are done with it.
Make the polluter pay, essentially.
Pretty much. The rules also aim to encourage the design of more durable, repairable, and easily recyclable clothing in the first place. However, some critics argue the targets, especially for food waste, aren't ambitious enough. They fall short of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. They're calling for stricter measures and stressing that effective public awareness campaigns are crucial to actually change consumer habits. Legislation alone might not be enough.
Needs ambition and public buy-in. Okay, now for a rather unique governmental response to a societal issue. Russia is dealing with a declining birth rate, a fertility crisis. And one approach they're taking involves abortion prevention classes at a vocational college in Crimea.
Yes, that's correct. The Primorsky Vocational College in Crimea, which is currently administered by Russia, has implemented this mandatory abortion prevention course. It's planned to run through the 2025-2026 school year. It's a very direct response to Russia's demographic challenges, falling birth rates, shrinking population.
What do these classes actually involve?
The initiative reportedly includes monthly events focused on raising awareness about the legal and perceived ethical implications of terminating a pregnancy. They also educate students on reproductive health generally, aiming to prevent early sexual activity. This is part of a broader push by Russian lawmakers. They're advocating for various measures to discourage abortion nationwide, things like potential penalties for anyone found to have pressured a woman into an abortion, and even financial incentives for doctors and clinics that successfully dissuade women from the procedure. It reflects deep government anxiety about the fertility crisis. Births in 2024 apparently hit their lowest level since 1999, so they're rolling out various pro-family support measures too, cash payments for having children, reviving old Soviet-era awards like the Mother Heroine title for women with large families. It's a multi-pronged and certainly controversial effort to boost the population.
A really stark example of government trying to influence very personal choices in response to national demographic trends. Okay, let's shift from national policy to workplace disputes. Over in the UK, at Airedale Hospital, about 150 staff, cleaners, porters, security guards held a protest. They're calling out what they describe as a two-tier pay system. What's that about?
It seems to be about perceived unfairness in pay scales for staff doing similar work, possibly depending on when they were hired or if they're directly employed versus contracted out. These workers are demanding equal pay for equal work, essentially calling for standardized salaries regardless of their specific role within that support staff category or their employment status.
Right.
And this local dispute at Airedale really taps into a much broader national conversation in the UK and, frankly, in many countries about wage equity, especially for essential workers in the healthcare sector. It highlights ongoing issues around fair pay, the impact of potential privatization or outsourcing on wages, and how these inequalities affects staff morale, recruitment, retention, and ultimately the quality of patient care.
A reminder that fair pay for essential workers remains a critical issue everywhere. Okay, finally, let's look at a really positive initiative aimed at bridging communities and economies. It's called the Global Exchange, unlocking wealth and opportunity across the diaspora, launched by the TD Jakes Group. The goal is to strengthen ties between Africa and people of African descent around the world. Sounds powerful.
It's a very significant and visionary initiative, yes. The first event was held recently on Martha's Vineyard in the U.S. It brought together leaders from various fields, business, culture, politics, specifically to address the historical disconnections between the African continent and the global diaspora, and to actively foster collaboration.
What kind of things did they discuss?
The discussions covered a wide range, focusing on practical ways to build bridges. Things like mental health challenges within the diaspora, identifying real capital investment opportunities in Africa, exploring the role of emerging technologies, and even community building strategies through things like real estate investment. There's a clear recognition behind this initiative of two powerful converging trends. Africa's growing demographic and economic influence projections suggest a quarter of the world's population will be African by 2050.
Wow.
And simultaneously, the increasing economic power within the Black community globally, some estimates project its collective economic impact could exceed $6.8 trillion by 2027. So the global exchange is really about strategically fostering these transatlantic collaborations to unlock shared wealth, create opportunities, and build on that common heritage and future potential. It's quite ambitious. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? I mean, from those tiny gut bacteria acting like brain bodyguards to AI chips powered by light getting 100 times more efficient. That's just incredible. We jumped from ancient Maya fires teaching us about societal collapse all the way to figuring out how to nudge asteroids even if they throw boulders back at us.
We really did. And we saw just how intensely human dramas continue to shape the world stage. You had Nepal's Gen Z protests fueled by social media leading to a government collapse. Then France, grappling with debt and political instability that could shake the entire EU. We wrestled with those tricky ethical questions around AI that hallucinates, the implications of an internet filling up with bots. And we explored complex resource politics, like Ethiopia's massive dam project and the ripples it sends downstream.
Yeah, every single story we talk about, whether it's deep science about our own bodies or the massive shifts in global power or tech changing everything, and just reminds you how interconnected and constantly changing everything is. It's definitely a lot to keep track of, but it's also kind of amazing, right? It shows human creativity, our resilience, but also just how unpredictable life on this planet can be.
Absolutely. And as we went through this deep dive, you really see how things that seem far removed, maybe reassessing life on an icy moon or the global race for sustainable energy, they actually offer really profound insights into our own present situation and maybe our future path.
Yeah.
You know, in a world where chatbots might confidently lie to us and nations argue over shared water sources, what new connections, what new layers of understanding will you look for as the story of our planet keeps unfolding? How will these insights maybe shape how you see things?
That's a great question to ponder. Some powerful thoughts to leave you all with. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.